All right. Hey, Matt. So we're going to kick off this next section with more activities from Seattle Lock Sport, some live lockpicking activities, and Matt will introduce us to some impressioning. All right, Matt, whenever you're ready.
Hey, can you hear me? Very cool. Give me 1 second to get this slide deck shared. I got it just a few minutes ago. This talk is a little impromptu because we are planning to do a recorded impressioning video that our good friend Peter Yakmetic made this week and was going to share, but unfortunately sharing video is apparently not going so well over GoToMeeting. So we're going to do this live with a deck I have never seen before. So a little bit of slideshow karaoke. This is great. I've also never used LibreOffice until today. It's the only thing that'll open this presentation. So good times. Michael, can you see my camera and my screen? Is everything working? Cool. All right. So a little bit about me first. I'm Matt Burrow. I'm on one of Microsoft's red teams and been doing lockpicking for probably 5 years. Been going to a lot of conferences like LockCon and LockFest, and also hanging out Lockpick Villages at DEF CON, this kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit about impressioning, a little bit about lockpicking. If you've been in the village earlier today, you saw Lothar do a bunch of good lockpicking demonstrations. He'll be joining us again to do some more. But we'll talk a little bit about impressioning now. So what is impressioning? Impressioning is the ability to make a key for a lock having only a key blank and knowing nothing about the lock itself, other than what kind of key blank it needs. So if you could imagine walking up to a door, sticking in a key blank, pulling it out, doing something to that key blank, and then putting it in and having it work as the key for that door, that's what impressioning is all about. So let's go through what it is and how it works. And again, apologies. I'm a little rough on these slides. I've not seen this deck before, so this is fun. All right, so here we have a European cylinder. This is a Euro format lock. If you go anywhere throughout Europe, you're very likely to see this style of lock. If you're in America, you probably think this lock looks like it's mounted upside down. You can see the pins are coming up from the bottom, kind of going up towards the sky. Locks don't care which way they're mounted. They're spring-based, so it's fine to mount them either way. In America, we tend to mount them the American way. In Europe, they mount them the right way, as people who created this deck would say. So there you go. There it is, mounted upside down for them, but as you might expect to see here in the US. All right, so thanks. So I should thank some people first. Yas Wires created this deck. Yas is a wonderful impressioner, great person to know. If you ever get to see any of his demos, he can impression a lock in minutes. That same lock would probably take me 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but yeah, eventually you get it open. And that's one of the nice things about impressioning is that you can keep trying at it. And unlike lockpicking, you can actually resume partway through, take a break, which is really good. Your hands don't cramp up and things like that. We'll get into that in a little bit. All right. Another person to thank is Deviant Olam. Deviant put together a bunch of these animations on lockpicking, and so you'll see those throughout this deck as well. So if you walk up to a lock here in America, this is what you're likely to see, right? You've got the outer shell of the lock, you have the inner plug, which is the light yellow portion here, and then you have a pin and a keyway. Keyway's in gray, the pin is that red bit sticking down that is going to interact with the key. If we shave off just the very front of that lock, if you imagine just milling it down or taking a file to it and getting a nice clean cutaway, you would see this looking down the lock. So same front, you can still see the keyway at the bottom, you can still see the plug and the shell, but you can see now an extra pin in here, right? You can still see that red pin that you could see before, but you can also see a blue pin and a spring. So the spring is providing tension down on the driver pin, that's the blue pin, and the key pin, the pin that interacts with the key as you insert into the lock, is going to hold it in place there. And we might even get some animations. There we go. So if we try turning this very simple lock, you can see we're not able to rotate the plug, so we can't unlock the lock because the blue pin is binding, right? It's running up against the plug and the side of the shell of the lock there. Now if we insert a key, and the key is the proper height, it lifts the driver pin up to the proper height, just to the shear line there, which is the gap between the plug and the shell, and allows the plug to rotate. Now if we switch directions and we look at the side of the lock and look at a cross section, instead of seeing just one pin stack, you can see there's actually 5. Now, there's a lot of different brands of locks, a lot of different styles of locks. This particular lock has 5. That's what you'll see in many locks, especially in North America. But if you have a cheaper lock, like a master padlock maybe, one of the lower end ones, might only have 3 or 4 pins. 5 is pretty typical though. There's also all kinds of other locks, dimple locks, distatainer locks, crazy other mechanisms that can lock up the plug, but this is what you see most commonly. Here we go. We're inserting a key into this lock. Again, we're at the side view here. There we go. And you can see this is the correct key. All of those pins line up to the shear line. Made a nice straight line across the plug. So that is the proper cut of key for this lock. And there it is inserted. Again, you can see, actually in this one, you can see that one of the pins is the wrong height, right? So if you look at position number 2 there, you can see that the driver pin is still down just a fraction into the plug. So that's going to prevent this lock from operating. If we adjust that height too high, now instead of the driver pin blocking from turning, it's now the key pin. But same result, you can't open the lock because of that one position. All right, so let's talk about binding order and binding of pins. So in a perfect world, right now, all of these driver pins are preventing this lock from turning, right? If you stuck in it the wrong key, or just put a screwdriver or something in there and tried to turn it, every one of those 5 blue pins is in the wrong position and is going to stop the lock from rotating. But in a perfect world, it's never just one, right? Or sorry, it's never all 5, it's usually just one. And the reason for that is manufacturing tolerances. So if you think about how the lock is manufactured, you have this plug with 5 holes drilled in the top for these pins to interact with. Then the pins are bits of metal. Problem is, drilling holes on cylindrical surfaces is really hard, and it's hard to do well, and it's hard to do straight. And so even with really high-end machining, you can never get all 5 of those holes drilled exactly the same size in exactly the right position, all in a straight line. Additionally, the pins that you get aren't all going to be perfect cylinders, right? You'll have some that have bits of, you can kind of see in this bottom picture here, there's like some metal missing from one of those pins. The pins are kind of rounded out. They're definitely not just straight cylinders, they're kind of almost ovals, right? And so because of these manufacturing tolerances, only one of these pins is actually going to be the pin preventing the lock from turning first. So let's say that's this pin here, pin number 4. Again, this is what binding looks like. So now not all 5 of those pins are binding, just one of them is. The slide will advance. Maybe. Okay, so now we're inserting a turning tool. If you watched the earlier talks, you know you need 2 tools for picking a lock. You need a turning tool to apply the turning pressure that you would typically apply with a key. And you need a second tool to do the lifting action, which is what the bitting of the key performs normally. So here we're sticking in a single pin pick, and we're checking. We're not feeling any pressure on the first pin. The second pin, these are just free moving because they're not bound up. Third pin is fine. Now we try the 4th pin. It's a little bit harder to push up, and then we feel a click as that sets. And now we're not sure which pin is binding next, right? The next furthest pin that's going to prevent the lock from turning, like furthest to the left or furthest to the right, depending which way you're rotating. So we try again, we find the next one, okay, feel another click. And we'll go and try to find the next one. Now, of course, this order changes lock to lock, and it's not like, oh, all master number 3 is set in order 3, 2, 1, 4 or something. Again, this is just all about the manufacturing tolerances when that lock was made. So, the next lock off the line might have been manufactured just slightly differently. The drill slipped slightly on pin 3 on this one versus pin 2 on the next one. So it's something you just have to, as you're picking it, feel out for every single unique lock. All right, so this is just an article talking about lock sport and lock picking. Again, it's something that's grown quite a bit in recent years. Here you can see Jos being featured. We also mentioned Holly here. Holly's great, and Holly is in the Lockpick Village comms channel. If you want to go speak to her, she's actually one of the people who taught me lockpicking originally. Actually, Jos and Holly did. They're both vastly knowledgeable and have both won crazy impressioning competitions. So way better than I am at this, but yeah, go chat with them. They're awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about impressioning, right? I kind of mentioned it's the art of making a key without knowing anything about the lock. So think about this question, right? Especially if you're in information security. How long can I stand in front of your server closet without a security guard coming up to me or someone else who belongs there coming and asking me questions, right? 2 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, 2 seconds every day. If I can stand in front of your server room door for 10 minutes without anyone noticing, it's probably a problem. But 2 seconds, if I'm walking down the hall, no big deal, right? No one has a security response time of 2 seconds probably. So that's the cool thing about impressioning. So let's talk about how this works. So with impressioning, like I said, you start with a key blank. So that can be a challenge depending on the type of lock being used. If it has a restricted keyway, it might be hard to find the blanks, but for something like your typical home or a lot of businesses that use a pretty standard key that you can just go buy at a key supply house, if not even just a hardware store, you can buy these key blanks, right? Sometimes stores like Home Depot won't want to sell you key blanks, they want to sell you cut keys, but you can go online and easily find packages of 100 key blanks for common locks for $25. So here we can see we've inserted a key blank. So again, a blank has no cuts on it. This is just straight from the manufacturer. It's basically cut to all zeros. The bidding has different numbers, again, depending on the type of lock. So 0 would be the highest possible cut, and then depending on the key system, 5, 6, 9 might be the deepest cut. So here you can see all zeros again. All these key pins are pushed all the way up. You can see those springs are really condensed at the top, and we've got all our key pins up into the shell of the lock. Again, we know from before that only one of these is going to be binding, though, right? And assuming this is the same lock we already looked at a minute ago, that's going to be that 4th pin there. All right, so we've inserted our key. With impressioning, the first thing you want to do, you're taking a key, and we'll talk a little bit about tools, but you usually have the key held in something so you can get a little bit better leverage on it. Maybe a vise, like vice grips, or some specialty tools, and I'll show you some of mine for that. So once you have that key inserted, you're going to stick it in and kind of lift it and try to turn the key in both directions and give it a little bit of a rough shake. And the idea here is we're having that key interact with the key pins. Now, because only one of these is binding, you can see here that 4 of those pins are just going to lift up without doing any kind of pressure, right? Just like when we're picking, only one of those pins is binding, only one of them is harder to push up than the rest. Same thing is happening here. Only one of these pins is actually rubbing on the surface of the key with any kind of force. The rest are just riding on top easily. And so that rubbing action is actually going to leave a mark on this key blank in that 4th position. Come on, Office. All right. So now we're rotating the key the other direction. This is the interesting thing about impressioning, right? The key might only unlock a lock going, say, clockwise, but that doesn't mean you can't rotate the plug counterclockwise a little bit. And by rotating a little bit, we're now binding the pin that, if we were marking with the pin that was slightly offset furthest to the right, by rotating the other direction, we're now getting the pin that's slightly offset all the way to the left. And so we're actually getting rubbing marks in 2 spots. We're getting it in the 4th position and the 2nd position. So this is great. Now, it's going to be hard to see, but if you look really closely at this key, you can see there's 2 little gray dots, right? Right in those positions, where we had had those binding pins interacting with that key. If you couldn't see it, there's one, there's the other. So what does this look like in real life? Well, here's actually a key that has been put in a lock and started the first bit of impressioning. And one of the things people who impression like to do is have really good light source, really good magnification, because it's hard to see these marks, right? They're pretty small. The pins and locks already are pretty small. You're looking for a little imperfection in the surface of a key. So here you can see we've got it under a blue light and under kind of normal lighting with a little bit of magnification. And you can start to see some marks appearing on the key. All right, so back to our drawings. We've got our two marks. What do we want to do? What are those marks telling us? Well, those pins are binding, right? And if they're binding, it means they're not at the correct height. We know because this is a 0, 0, 0, 0 key blank. It's not possible that these are cut too low. They have to be too high of a position. So the only way we can go is down. So we get out a file, and I've got some here. See if I can pull out my impressioning files. We're going to take a little bit off that key. So again, there's not really necessarily one file that you have to use, but a lot of us who do impressioning a fair bit like to use a Grobit file. Let's see, we've got links I can probably share afterwards. Sorry, I wasn't planning to do this talk today, so don't have my tools organized in the slightest, but yeah, here we go. Here's a file. Hopefully you can see that. Let's see if I can see my own camera here at all. Maybe not. All right. Well, just have to assume you can see this. Anyway, here is my impression file. Not terribly big, right? Breaks down, can easily go in a bag. I can bring it with me on jobs and things. Really fine, delicate file. And the idea here is we just want to file down those two spots. And you want to make sure you're going perpendicular to the key, right? You don't want to wander off left or right. You want nice, straight, clean file marks. And you want to have the key nice and clean because you want to be able to see the next marks that appear. All right, so we stick this now filed down to the first position. I should talk about that a little bit. So like I said, biddings have code, right, that you would give to a locksmith. Oh, I need a key number 35124 as my cut. Those are the depths of the cuts on this key. And so we're just filing down to get to the first step. So looking at this key is now a 01010 key if I were to go to locksmith and ask for it. Right? You want to file down to the first possible position where the key is. Knowing how deep that is can usually be looked up. You can find the specs for any given lock you're attacking. So if you're attacking a quickset or a Schlage, go look up Schlage pin sizes, pin spacing, cut depths, and you'll find a nice table that'll say, oh yeah, each depth is this many thousandths of an inch or something. And so then you'll know you can grab a micrometer or something and see how deep you're cutting as you're filing. The more you do it, the more accustomed you get to it, and you can kind of start to know that, okay, if I do 3 kind of hard presses with the file, that's going to be 1 depth or something. It all depends on how hard you are on your files, what types of key, the depths, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we've got this nice filed key here. Let's try it again. All right, we're still binding here, and you can see that would be the case because we're not at the shear line yet in that position. So we're going to get another mark. Rotate the other direction, give it a shake, get another mark. So 2 marks in those 2 valleys, there and there. And here you can see the marks again under magnification. Pretty clear, there's a mark. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you can see a mark there. Same mark without blue light, mark there. Yep. So we'll file those down. All right. So now we've got a 02020 key that we're trying. You can see that we've now reached the proper position, so we shouldn't get any marks anymore from that spot. So if we try it again, now can you see any marks on the key? I see 2. We still have this one because again that hasn't reached the proper depth yet. This one isn't marking anymore, so that valley is clean, but we do see a new one here a little bit closer to the bow of the key. So that's our new binding pin. Bring that down, bring the next spot down, take a look under magnification. There you go. This is actually, you can see the timestamp down there. This was a minute and 27 seconds for Jos to do this. I am nowhere near that fast. There you can see what the factory key looked like. That's the one on the top. And the bottom is the key blank that he was filing. And yeah, pretty quick. And got an open. That kind of time would pretty much certainly win you, any championship you're in, just about. It's about as fast as anyone can do this. And there you go. There he is with the cup. All right, this says demo. I'm not going to do a demo because I don't have quite all the tools I need with me here. This was super impromptu, but I can show you a few of the tools I bring with. I've got my kit right here with me. So I've already shown you the file. And I'm going to try one more time here to bring up the GoToWebinar screen bits. All right. Webinar is going to be mean to me. So again, I'm just going to have to assume you're seeing what I'm holding up and hope for the best. So I mentioned that you need to mount your key in a handle. That gives you better grip on the actual key, because trying to get those marks just holding on to the very tip of the key, you're going to hurt your fingers. You're not going to get a very good mark. I've got a couple of different ones in here. So this one is the Prolock. This is the one I tend to use all the time. Has a nice feel to it. It's pretty solid. It's really easy to adjust the key. You can see there's an Allen wrench in here. Awesome. Michael says to hold stuff up closer. So hopefully you can see that. Yeah, this is the one I tend to use all the time. Comes with an Allen hex key, and then you just put your key in there, tighten it in, stick this in the lock, and jiggle around. And this is a Freeman. I don't tend to like this tool as much as some people do. This one has this cool screw-on base that you can actually tighten and lock a key right here in the jaws, and then use this for your impressioning. I find the keys slip out of the jaws a little too easily, so I tend to like this one a little bit less. But one of the things about impressioning is it's nice to have backup tools, right? You're kind of doing these mechanical forces on keys that aren't necessarily meant to have these forces applied to them. You can break off a key. And so having a couple different ones ready to go, especially in a competition where you're trying to go fast, having a couple sets of tools prepped and ready are always good. Let's see, I've shown you a file, I've shown you my grips. Those are the main parts of impressioning. In competition, we like to mount our locks in a vise, right? Because they're not mounted in a door or something that we're attacking. So I've actually designed and 3D printed this little block. This is for a Euro cylinder. You can see the shape matches what we looked at earlier. The backside has a couple of butterfly wings cut out of it for the cam to go through. That's the part that actually actuates a door in real life. Of course, we don't care about that so much in competition, other than the fact that it needs to turn. But yeah, mount this with some clamps to a table. It's nice and light. I can fly with it. I compete in Europe every year, at least every year until this year, thanks to COVID. So this was way easier to carry than a standard vise, which is what my first several years of impressioning were. And some of my friends in Europe have free vices for me because I didn't feel like flying back with them. So that's been fun. I also mentioned light and magnification. Let me pull this out. This is a magnifying desk lamp. You plug it in, it lights up. It's got the nice light up ring, but then it also has the magnifying glass right on the front. It's actually got 2 different levels of magnification. So using this, I can look at the keys really well in competition. Again, I've since upgraded. I used to buy these at Harbor Freight, which was fine, but the Harbor Freight ones in the US are US plugs. I ordered this one online to get a European plug since I tend to compete in Europe quite a bit. So that made that a little bit easier for me. So this is my European travel impressioning bag here. All right, so that is it for the demo. Sorry, it's not an actual demo. If you want to see people doing this live, go check out YouTube or check out some of the videos. I think we have some links too. You can see some of the competitions and people getting opens. So All right. So how long has impressioning been around? We've been doing it in competitions for a number of years now, but it actually goes back way beyond that. This FBI agent, Edward Tickle Jr., was one of the well-known guys who did this very early on in the late 70s. This was someone who would go get into buildings for the FBI if they needed to go do a raid or something like that. So it's this technique. This definitely predates lock sport as a hobby. How else can you learn about this, right? So I walked you through some of the basics. There's more videos online. Another good thing is this book. There's two versions of it. There's one in English, and then there's another in German. The English version you can, I think, buy from this website, but you can definitely get the German version there. This is Oliver or Ollie Dietrichson's book. He was one of the first lock sport hobbyists to go and do impressioning. And this book is filled with just tons of really awesome photos. One of the hardest things when you first get started impressioning is knowing what the marks mean, right? You're looking at a key, and it's not like you're going to get those perfect marks every time and only in that spot. You might get some errant marks as you insert or pull out the key. You might have some, shavings of metal as you filed it that, end up scratching the key a little bit. And so, like, is this actually a mark or is it not a mark? Can be a little tricky when you get started. So having like a really good reference guide with sample photos of this is what different marks look like is super helpful. So if you get a chance, highly encourage you to pick up this book. It's really good. And here's an example on the inside. You can see some of these photos and the quality of them, and then some marking. Again, this is the German version. There is an English translation. The English in it isn't perfect, but it's definitely good enough that you get the point. And here's some more photos. You can see some super high magnification showing the different marks that you might see on a key. All right, in case my holding up of things wasn't super helpful, here's a better photo of kind of a toolkit of things you might need. So we'll go kind of clockwise, starting from the upper left. There you can see a bunch of different files, kind of on the top left to center of the screen. Lots of different styles of files. In the center, you can see kind of the flat blade wide files. We don't find those super useful for impressioning, right? They're going to leave a really wide cut on a key, probably wider than a single pin. We really like these round files for doing impressioning work. Some people prefer the half round. That works as well. It's a matter of preference. Pick up some cheap files, give it a try, see how you like them, and then you can invest in better ones. Here's some nice Swiss files. I carry some of these with me. I got this at the last conference I was at as well. They're nice because these are also pretty small. Pull one of these out here. Yeah. See, nice and sharp, very fine. These ones are half rounds, so that works quite well. And another small one. This is really great if you do field work. Actually, this one is one of the ones I expect Deviant might carry if you watched his last talk. This is a Growbit USA half round, just a really small, like 4-inch file. So the bigger ones are definitely way better in competition. You can get a lot more material removed in a single stroke, which if you're going fast is important. But if you're trying to do something out in the field, smaller sometimes wins. All right, up here you can also see we've got a couple of different forms of measurement. Again, if you don't know, you haven't perfected this art where you know exactly how deep you're going with each file stroke, it's really helpful to have a tool to measure. Doesn't have to be anything super fancy. I tend to like just these digital calipers. Again, Harbor Freight, not too expensive, maybe 10 or 20 bucks at the most, just to measure each depth of the key as I'm cutting it, and then I'll carry the spec sheet, got at least one here, possible depths. I think this is Abbas depths, but you can get them for Schley. You can look these up online. Quick set, whoever it is that you're trying to impression. Of course, you need key blanks, and so that you see there in the middle. Again, depending on how rare or common the lock is, those might be hard or easy to find, but they tend to be pretty cheap once you can get them for most locks. And then you need something if you're doing a competition to hold the locks. And so that's the vise at the bottom or in the very center of the bottom. That's actually a camera mounting system they use in theater and photography, but those tend to hold locks really well too. They're very lightweight and very adjustable. They kind of move a whole bunch of different axes, so you can get the lock exactly how you want to hold it. Really good for competition. So yeah, I think that's it for the tooling for now. Let's skip forward. All right, we've got some zoomed in photos. Again, slide deck karaoke here, so bear with me. You can see different forms, right? In competition, these round dial ones tend to work really well for people to go fast. I personally don't have one of those. I use just calipers, but either one's going to work for you. Again, talked about a bunch of different types of files, different ways to mount the lock, and your key blanks. All right, here you can see some illumination options. So I've already shown you the one I use, which is just like that one in the top right. There's also some smaller options. Again, great if you're going to do this, in a van or something like that. You've got ones that clip on the end of a standard like Maglite flashlight, which give you magnification and lighting all in one. Those are kind of nice, a little spendy, but good if you're going to do this repeatedly. And then there's some super high-end, crazy ones. I've seen several that are hundreds of dollars that are custom designed with little baffles. You stick the key in, they have illumination built in, they have black lights and red lights and blue lights and all the different things, just so you can see every possible imperfection on the key. Again, if you're going to do this a ton, maybe that's a good investment. Personally, haven't quite gone there yet. Ways to hold the key. There you can see the Prolock I was talking about. You can see just standard vice grips. Vice grips, you tend to put a lot of force on the key. You might snap it a little easier, a little harder to hold, so I don't recommend those, but in a pinch they work. Or you can get something custom designed by a machinist, which is what a lot of the competition winners, people like Yoss and Holly, tend to have some custom tools, kind of like the one you see there at the bottom right. Another thing that's really helpful, when you go to start filing the key, it helps to know where you should expect to see your first marks. It also helps, one thing that a lot of competitors will do in competition is the key blanks you buy, like I said, oh yeah, a key blank is all zeros at the beginning. That might not be the case, or it might, depending on the manufacturer, sometimes they leave a little extra metal so it's not quite a zero, because most locksmiths are going to cut it down anyway, with a code cut, so it doesn't matter if the blank is exactly the right height as long as it's more than enough blank. But also, locks tend to not have zero cut pins in them. That's pretty rare. So usually in competition, the first cut is going to be a 1. And so a lot of people who compete to go very fast will start not by sticking a key in and getting any data from it, but they'll actually just start filing immediately all the spots down to the first position, so they're ready to go with a key that potentially might start to work. So for these reasons, it's really helpful to know where those pins are in relation to the key. It's hard to know when you're holding up a key, and if you just had measurements with the calipers, that's going to take you quite a bit of time to line up and file just right. So a lot of people will carry just the filed out portion of the plug of a lock. So you can stick the key blank in there, and it's going to be, because this is filed out, higher than those positions, but you can see exactly where those pins will fall on the key. And then carrying something like a Sharpie, you can mark the key up pretty well and just dab the spots where you need to start filing, and that gives you a really good reference point. It's also good to check your work if you're seeing a mark that you're not quite sure, was that a mark from a pin? Was it just some errant mark from mishandling the key or something? You can stick it back in this gauge and say, okay, is it lining up where I think a pin should be marking, or is this like way off somewhere else on the key that I wouldn't expect to mark anyway? So here you can see a key blank inserted into one of these. You can see it's sticking up over those file marks, but you get a really good sense of where the file marks need to be on that key. Of course, if you want to go the fancy route, there are some professional tools for this. Jord Knapp, a Dutch locksmith and machinist and safe technician, developed this tool. I've actually got one here. It's kind of the top end of my impressioning tools, but yeah, you can see one right there in person. So this is actually a standard. You can even see it says Avis on it, an Avis lock that's been taken apart. All the pins have been removed, and in place of the pins, like diamond tip drill bits have been inserted there. And so when you stick in that key blank and you rotate the plug, you're actually scratching the top of the key with these diamond tip drill bits. And so you can see the marks there at the bottom. You can see an unmarked key on the left and a marked key on the right. And so again, the idea here is just to mark where those pin positions are on the key so you can start to prepare the key and just start filing in those positions and get it nice and clean and prepped and cut to just the right first steps that you want to start the competition in. Some other tools, again, this is basically the bare minimum of what you need to do impressioning, a little bit of light, a little bit of magnification, and a file. So you could stick this in a pocket and of course keep link. So, that's maybe $30 worth of parts right there, and you're good to go start doing this. So I'm sure there's a funny quip about this, but yeah, here you can see a zip tie securing this very beefy chain within a master 3. So different levels of security, right? Yeah. Good times. All right. There is a bit more to this presentation, but I want to give a little bit of thanks here. So some thanks to Deviant, who made those animations you saw earlier. Thanks to Barry Wells, who's one of the original Dutch Tool Netherlands folks, one of the very, very early lock sporters. Ali for excerpts from the book and photos there, and York for his awesome tools. And also, again, this isn't my deck, so definitely want to thank Jos Wires for putting together this deck, and also Holly Power for teaching me impressioning. Both super awesome people. Thanks to both of you. Great. Some additional content. So we talked about the books. There are other books as well. There's both of Deve's books, Keys to the Kingdom, that can go through some of these and also more lockpicking and things with you. Then there are some other high security lock books if you're just curious about locks in general and lockpicking. Those are all good resources. There's a bunch of videos online. Deviant has some of his videos online. Tool has some videos online. Check out any of these websites. They have tons of information about lockpicking, impressioning, locks in general, just good stuff. And there it says, Google me. I'm Matt Burrow. Don't Google me. You can if you want, but Googling Jos Wires is probably going to get you a lot more about impressioning than Googling me for sure. So, and there are their names in case you need to Google them. Make it easy to find. All right, and then we have a final little bit, an encore, visually impressioning step by step. And so this is actually just going through the key and looking at the marks. So we have an uncut key, and then here you can see some slight marks. This is the key that's been marked with that tool I just showed you that puts the beginning positions of the pins on the key for you. And so now we've been filing. Like I said, it's very rare to find a lock with a 0 positioned pin. And so we're going to file down to all ones as a starting point. And we'll stick it in and look. And now do you see a mark on the key? I do. It's at position 2. We're counting from the bow of the key, right, the shoulder, part you hold on to. And so right there, we can see a nice mark. Right. If we zoom in, you can still see the mark. And now we've filed a bit deeper, and we had 2 positions that we filed out, so we've gone deeper there and there. And if we look closely, we can see a mark. And so now we've cut that down. So we're at 1, 3, 1, 1, 2 for our depths. Look, again, we see a mark here. So now 1, 4, 1, 1, 2. Another mark, still in position 2. Different angle, you can see it better, right? There's a nice notch there. So now we can get the key in, and it does start to turn, but it takes a lot of force. That'll happen if your cuts are just slightly off depth, or if you're just one position away and all the other pins are lining up. You've only got one pin blocking that key from turning, so you're really close to getting it. And now we've got a mark here on 5 and a big crater mark. So that pin is like I said, we're forcing it to turn. It's like it's going to groove in the metal, but it's going to start going on position 2. Different angle, you can see that big notch kind of taken out. So that's how much damage a pin can actually do to a key when you're really close there and you're just putting a ton of force, again, with one of these handles Again, that's a reason why it can be easy to break a key off in a lock while doing this. So you want to make sure if you're practicing, don't do this on your actual house or any lock that's in use. Just good lock picking, lock sport hobbyist practice. Don't pick locks that you don't own. Don't pick locks that are in use. Same thing here goes for impressioning, right? You don't want to break a key off in your door and have to call a locksmith out. You definitely don't want to do this on someone else's lock without permission. There's that mark. A couple different angles showing how deep it is. Again, you tend to not get these really strong marks until you're just right at the position and super, super close. You're not going to get a super deep crater like that if you're just, 5 positions away or something. There you go. There's a crater. Craters are super awesome. It's just super obvious which position you're in. There's no guessing. There's no kind of questions there. So there we go. This is the key that worked in that lock. You can see we kind of forced it in position 2 there a little bit. You got that crater, but everywhere else worked. Lock turns. And now we've cleaned up that second position just to get it exactly to the right depth so you don't have that crater there. And there you have a working key. Looks a little different than a machine cut key, but works in the lock just the same. So there you have it. Happy to try to take any questions and do my best there. So Michael, I don't have a Discord up or anything like that on this machine. So if there's any questions or anything you want to ask, happy to cover that.
Yeah, so far nothing on the question end. However, one, thank you for doing as you said, the presentation karaoke here, or the PowerPoint karaoke, given you've never seen this deck before. Also, extra thank you to both Yoss, Holly, and also Peter South, who's originally going to do this presentation. That recording will be available for our attendees as the content was prepared beforehand.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to cover a couple things, I briefly mentioned, but I think I maybe didn't go into super depth about. When you think about this attack, the only thing you're doing at the place where you need to do the attack is actually sticking a key in a lock, rotating it a bit, and then taking it out, right? And so if you're kind of holding this handle and you have kind of a small impressioning handle, or maybe if you just are super strong hands and you're only using the key blank, right? You're walking up to a door, you're sticking the key in, you're shaking it a bit, and you're walking away. It looks like you're taking a key that doesn't fit the lock, trying it in the lock and leaving, which isn't a super rare occurrence, right? People walk up to doors, oh, this isn't my door, I'm trying the wrong office door. I didn't have my coffee this morning, right? And so it's not an overtly suspicious thing to do. And so if you're doing this kind of like the one slide said about your server room, if you have a long time to pull off this attack and you want to get into that one room in your office building and you've got the key blank, maybe you're doing it on your coffee break once a week, right? And what are the odds that someone's going to notice, one day a week, you happen to walk up to a door, stick a key in, and nothing happens to the door, right? You don't open it, you walk away. Probably nothing. You take that key, it's now been marked, you can do the filing offline, right? You don't have to do it right in front of the door. You're not pulling out your file and making all this horrible filing noise. You're doing that back in your car, you're doing it at your house, in your office, whatever it is, right? So you can do this attack very stealthily. And again, the nice thing is once you got those marks in your filing, right, your key is done. It's not like picking where, oh, as soon as you take tension off the lock, you've lost all your work. No, you're doing this just slowly over time. You want to do 5 minutes today, 5 minutes tomorrow, like no big deal. Totally doable. So for that, that's why you see people like the FBI really appreciating this attack. They don't have to send someone out on site to go pick the lock and hope they get it picked in those 3 minutes they want to go raid this building or something like that. So super, super powerful method of getting into things.
Awesome. Matt, again, thank you for presenting a talk that on the subject matter you're very familiar with, yet not seen the deck beforehand. So yeah, we will have Peter's presentation available after the conference for those looking for a more in-depth, detailed impressioning guide. And then Matt, thank you for joining us and thank you for giving this presentation.
Sure, yeah, happy to be here. Yeah,
so we'll be back.
Kelsey ready at this point?
We'll be back in about 10 minutes, kicking off Kelsey doing his live lockpicking activity. We'll see how many more he can get running through.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.